Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. We all have problems we're looking to solve, and we know that there are solutions out there, but we struggle with this. How do we find that solution? Where does the nudge come to help us take the next step, start solving tough problems? That's the intention of this podcast, is to help you find your catalyst, take that next step. I'm Mike Simmons. I am the founder of Catalyst Sale. Today, I have Morgan Ingram on the podcast. It's an awesome conversation. This is the second time that Morgan has joined me on the podcast. Morgan is empowering the sales professional of the future. He is the host of the One Up Formula podcast, 3-time LinkedIn top sales voice, and you can follow him on both Instagram and TikTok. We will include links in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by the Catalyst Sale Game Plan, our approach to goal setting and execution. Head to findmycatalyst.com for more information. Morgan, it is awesome to see you again. I think most everybody in the world knows Morgan Ingram these days. Yeah. But for those of you who've been following the podcast for a while, Morgan was on super early days back when we were the Catalyst Sale podcast. We had the original cover art, all of that kind of stuff. So it was years ago. And just to date it, the years ago was back. I think you were in the middle of still creating the SDR Chronicles. Morgan, it's great to see you. How are you doing?
It's great to see you as well. I'm doing good. Upgrade since then. I got lights now. I got a mic. Lots changed.
It is awesome. And so we're going back and forth on whether or not we want to have video content. We did a video version with Samantha McKenna a couple of episodes ago. I was just trying to figure out the whole thing on editing, and does it make sense to just go with it as it is, or do we need to do some of the cleanup? And one of the biggest challenges I've got when it comes to things like the microphone is I breathe too heavy into the microphone. Like I've got to step back here.
That's why I'm back here. Yeah, I get too excited.
So what's going on with you? What are you doing? What are you up to these days?
So a couple things, one thing that I've been really focused on is elevating the voice of the trenches. So last time that I was on here, it was the SDR Chronicles, and I was one of, if not the only person creating content from an individual contributor standpoint. And now there's a lot of creators out there, and I see a lot of people not really focused on the tactical pieces, and it's just creating content, which is fine. But what I'm trying to do is tap back into what started it all, which is being the voice of the trenches. Now, I'm not an SDR anymore. I'm not a seller. I'm not at a company. My role is completely different now. So I'm trying to find those people and elevate them and give them a platform based on the platform that I have. So that's led into a content house, which we did. So if you're familiar with like Hype House or like YouTube Content House, we did it for LinkedIn creators. That was really fun. Making the webinars more interactive. We just did a email March Madness style. So we put like 8 cold emails together, and then we graded them to see who the winner was. We had fun with that while still giving tactics. So really my whole thing has been, how can we make more engaging, entertaining content that will bring people in for what we're doing is like, elevating the sales profession and not make it boring or make it feel aggressive or make it feel like very weighty, which I feel a lot of content is. So that's like been my focus as of late. And on top of coaching and training, but the content side, the tapping into people, elevating them, the voice of the trenches, that's really where I'm at.
So when you say content being a bit weighty, what do you mean by that? Like what comes to mind when you say that?
Oh, just overcomplication. And this is nothing, there's like nothing against methodologies, but if you think of a methodology, it's very, very weighty, right? Like can overcomplicate everything when the processes and the tactics can be more simple than what we make it. I think we just make it too complicated sometimes. It really doesn't need to be.
I get that feedback over and over and over again. And I struggle to break through it because it makes sense in my mind when I'm sharing what I think are really, really simple frameworks. But as you get into the detail of this profession that we're in, there are nuances, and those nuances, if they start to come out, start to look like complexity. So it's just the way that I've been thinking about that, and I don't know if it's the right way to think about it, but it's almost like a lens where sometimes you can zoom in on something and you can zoom out, and depending on whether you're zoomed in or you're zoomed out, there's going to be different perspective that you have through it. But I'm struggling with it. So how do you help, or how can people get better at making things less weighty, or how do we simplify things?
Yeah. So a really good advice, I don't know who I got it from. He was like, hey, when you explain something, if a 7 or 8-year-old cannot understand it, then you're not making it clear enough.
Okay.
So what I always think about is, can a 7 and an 8-year-old understand what I'm saying? And that will make you take a step back and realize I'm probably overcomplicating the crap out of what I'm saying right now. Because if a 7 or 8-year-old can't get it, then you've overcomplicated that process for whatever reason. You feel like you need to, but you probably don't. So then as I'm explaining things, I'm like, okay, can I go to a 7, 8-year-old, talk about it and be good? I can't. Okay, maybe I need to adjust. I need to shift. I need to do something different, right? So those are the things that I would tell people and encourage them, is to make it simple in that fashion and break it down so people can easily absorb it and go do it, which leads into why people don't execute, why they overthink, because we make it too complicated and then it becomes too overwhelming for people to do anything.
So let's talk a little bit about execution in the context of you pulling together an amazing group of people into a house in Atlanta. What was the inspiration? And I'm not a YouTube guy, so other than I've got some stuff on YouTube. So when you start talking about other content houses, the first time I saw Content House, I was thinking, like, what the heck is going on? Where is this coming from? Are we doing cribs now for salespeople? And I'm completely out of the loop.
Yeah.
However, when I watched some of the video content that came out, saw pictures of people that we all know, some of them have been on the podcast before. It was absolutely phenomenal. It was amazing. It was pretty cool to see things brought together. So what was the inspiration for it? How did it come together? Can you kind of walk through that?
Yeah. So it was something I thought about like actually years and years ago. When I first started creating content, I, again, was the only person. So I can't get a content house for me. That's weird. I mean, I guess I could. I could have, but like that would have gotten a lot of flack, especially earlier in the days. Like I was already getting tons of flack anyways for creating content, let alone if I went and got a house, like I would have been like laughed off the I would not have been good. Right. So I had to build my own platform, build my own credibility before I could even invite people to a house and then feel comfortable to even go. What my thought process was is, yes, I got them from like the YouTubes and the TikTok. I mean, at the time, during this time now, the TikTokers. Ultimately, though, what I realized is it was actually way more back than just the YouTubers and the TikTokers. I'm a massive music fan and I'm a massive music history fan. Okay. I study music a lot. And if people really paid attention to what I do, a lot of the things that I do are parallels to the music industry, because I believe the music industry has done the best job of marketing to the masses. No one can debate to me to any industry that has done it better than musicians, period. Billions of streams, millions, they have done it the best. You look at all the followings that rappers, entertainers have, they tend to end up being the highest. If you go look up the highest people, like the Taylor Swifts, the Ariana Grandes of the world, right? They're in the top echelon and they have done the best at marketing. So why am I bringing that up? I really dug deeply into rap. So the groups that we all know, right? The NWAs, the Cash Money, Young Money groups, like all these different groups, right? Like you think about it, right? The Dr. Dre's, things of the world. And what did they do really well, right? They brought multiple people together and it was a special event. Mm-hmm. So back in concerts, it was kind of like, hey, this person's going to perform. But then like, if you were in California, like, oh, wait, Snoop Dogg pulls up, Eazy-E pulls up, Dr. Dre pulls up, and you're like, this is the greatest show of all time. You didn't know they were going to show up, right? And it's a beautiful moment because it's like all my favorite people are here together. I had no idea that was going to happen. So I watch a lot of those music videos. I watch a lot of the documentaries and got an understanding of why people did that. So then my thought process was, okay, well, at some point, me in my like room with my... But I'm creating my content. I'm like, at some point, everyone will catch on and realize they need to create content on LinkedIn. I know it's important, but I'm not going to convince other people yet, but I know it's going to happen. And here we are 6 years later, and there's tons of creators on the platform. So then as I saw more of it, I'm like, COVID impacted a little bit more to be like, we haven't really gotten in person yet. No one has really connected in a very personal way in a very long time. So then I was like, all right, let's get 5, 6, 7 creators. Let's all put them in a house to not only create content, but to build quality relationships and go beyond just, I know you on the LinkedIn platform. Because there was people that I had, like Devin Reed. I've done 8 webinars with him. I've never met him in person.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So I was just like, what's he like? Right. Like there's a couple people I've only met once, 5 minutes at an event. See you later. Right. So And I see people's like newsletters, but I never like met them. I never like done content with them. I never spent a week with them. So that changed the relationship. Like, I feel like I know people now way better just because we spent 4 or 5 days together. So it was really about building that community. And then the last part was voice of the trenches. Everybody that I picked is active in their role. They actually sell. They actually are managing teams. They actually are creating content, like Devin, content writer for his organization. They're actually like the global SDR managers. I didn't pick people that are just create content. If you actually go look at all the people that came, it wasn't like, oh, let me go find a person who's just creating content to create content. No, I picked people purposely that were in roles so I could extract information, use our platform to then give advice to the community. Because I'm not in the role anymore. I can't do the SDR Chronicles. That wouldn't make sense. I'm not an SDR. And I'm not going to go back and go be an SDR, right? I'm just not going to do that. So I'm going to go find other people to elevate that. So those are all the pieces to what happened there.
There's some pretty cool stuff to get into there. And I think you should talk about bands like NWA and Dre and Eazy-E and pulling these groups together and the collaboration that comes together, or what Dre would do with surfacing someone like Eminem or surfacing someone like Snoop Dogg inside the albums that he would put out. It's cool to hear you talk about pulling people together as a collaboration, not only to amplify the quality of the content that's there, but to amplify the experience through a bit of surprise. But never would have thought about it that way until you went through and said, hey, here's what was happening back then. Here's what happens in the industry. And it happens in a number of different industries. Like there's Lollapalooza is an event that's out there, or there are events like a Country Thunder, or like all of these things where these groups of people will come together. Really, really, really cool stuff. What did you see when you brought everybody together and people just started being, and they just started working with each other? Like, did the creative process amplify up? Did people like what happened?
It was Mike, it was wild. So I normally go in most situations with no expectations, but because I thought about this and because there was a lot of people supporting it, shout out to everyone that supported. Like, this was not me task. Like, it was like, it took an army to a village, right, to do this task. So shout out to all those people. It was like we were all one big family and we knew each other for a very long time. It was an energy that I have never felt or seen before, because these are some people, like, I've only, again, met them for 5 minutes. Yeah. I've never met them at all. And we had our whole JV sales team there as well. And it was like we all worked really well together. We all meshed really well together. And it was like, again, like I said, one big happy family. It was pretty insane. And the creative level was definitely really high, because we were at one point, we were doing, and again, like I said, I have music parallels. One thing I studied is I don't know if you've ever looked up, how Young Thug makes his songs. Mm-hmm. So what he does is he goes in the studio and he plays a beat and he just starts humming. He's like, because he's trying to get the cadence of the song. Yep. And then he'll fill in words within the brackets of the cadence. Genius. So we didn't do that exact same thing. The reason I brought that up is because our creative level is just so high. TikTok has all these trending sounds. So literally I pulled out my phone, I'm like, all right, here's a trending sound. What do we do? And then someone's like, here's a topic. And then we filmed it. We're like, okay, next song. What do we do? Next song. And we just created like 15, 20 TikToks. Literally, we're just playing songs. And there was a group of 4 of us and we're like, oh, we should talk about emails, or, oh, we should talk about getting good. Like, it was just like crazy.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, like, this is insane right now. Like, we are just coming up with ideas on the fly right here. Let's go. Let's move quick. And it was a beautiful thing. I was just like, this is so insane, incredible. So that to me was just a show of just energy, support. People were excited. People were empowered. People were like, I've never felt this before. People were like, hey, I want to do this again. And it wasn't even over yet. So for me, it was just an empowering and enlightening experience. So sure.
The other thing that I thought was pretty cool about this whole thing, and it's neat to hear you talk about the inspiration of just a beat and the music, and then how that can kind of get people into a creative process. But you didn't just create content that showed up on LinkedIn. It was It was on Instagram. You mentioned TikTok. It was all over the place. Why was that? Why was it important to hit all of these different platforms?
I think it's important, just like as in sales, like you can't just cold call, you can't just email, right? You have to do multiple things to reach people. And it's the same thing. We have to do multiple things to reach people. So yeah, we created TikToks because we know that's important right now. It's going crazy. We're going really deep into YouTube because we know that's important for the SEO factor. And also, like, to be transparent, like I I don't even know like what happened, but I fell away from making videos because I was doing so many trainings. I became exhausted. So I was like, I did less videos, but video is where I shine the most, but I fell away from it. So now it's like, I have renewed energy. I feel like I'm on SDR Chronicles like 2.0 energy right now. It's just like, I feel like it's a different energy, like in the best way possible. And the reason for that is like, I'm diving deeper into video. Like I'm probably going to be like 90%, 95% video, just like TikToks and YouTube, like getting just better at video. Like that's like my main thing right now. I mean, I'm subpar writer, but I know I could take video to the next level and that can help with just being subpar writing. So going back to the point of what we're talking about, it was just to expand and reach as many people as possible. We like to call them, in our organization, like Brian's, trying to reach as many Brian's as possible, Brianna's as possible, who our audience is. They don't just live on LinkedIn. They're on Twitter. They're on TikTok. They're on YouTube. They're in these places. So we need to go reach them. And then if I take another step is that webinars, we do a weekly webinar and it's all virtual. And so within those webinars, what we wanted to do, and the reason I mentioned virtual is we wanted to make it more live. So when we were in the house, we did a webinar, but instead of us being in this like Zoom box that we're in right now, we were in person, like in the flesh. You saw me. I could see the comments on the screen. And I felt like I was talking to the audience even more personally. It felt like the audience was in the room with us. So we wanted to create that element, like for our podcast, like we did in-person interviews. Mm-hmm. In-person interviews, as you know, are completely different than this interview here. There's just a different energy about it. You can see the facial expressions more. You can feel the energy more. You feel the connection more. So that was the reason that we did that. We wanted to break the mold of what the content is on LinkedIn. Static text posts, static images. Let's make it more real. Let's make it come more to life. And that was the key.
Very cool. Let's talk a bit about execution. So you have this vision, you start bringing some people together, but then it actually comes down to, hey, we actually have to get the work done, get things out there. What's the gap that's out there? Why is there this gap between vision, knowledge, and execution?
Yeah. So vision, we could say, is one of the, I'm not saying that this is a walk in the park, but it's the easier part from a vision standpoint, right? Because you could talk it out, you can map it out, you could get the vision from anything, right? You could, depending on what you believe in, like I believe in God, right? So I could pray, I could get the vision from God and like, boom, right? You could believe in the universe and it shows you signs, right? You could talk to someone and like, I have this vision. There's a lot of great ideas and visions, right? And then the next part is the knowledge, right? Because once you have the vision, you have to get the knowledge to figure out what to do. So, and no one has any excuses. You cannot say it's not out there. You're a liar. You're a straight up liar. You can talk to me, DM me and be like, oh, Morgan, I can't find it. You're lying. You're not doing enough research. We have overflow of free podcasts, an overflow of free YouTube content, an overflow of courses. People are sharing more freely than they ever have in their life. There's no excuse to be like, I don't know how to do this. No, you're lying to yourself. I'll have that conversation with anyone any day. You're just most likely being lazy, straight up. Now, this is the hardest part. And this is where Kevin Dorsey, probably seen his content before, KD. I haven't talked about this actually at all really on a podcast, but this was a monumental shift in my entire career. I met up with him when he used to live out in LA. And it was actually it was like 2 weeks after Kobe died.
Okay.
So, and Kobe, he's mom mentality. Kobe, like if you look at my LinkedIn background, like
your focus this year, mom mentality.
That's my guy. Right. So we met up and we just got really deep. I mean, no shocker. It's when you're talking to KD, you get deep really quickly and you're like, okay, here we are. Right. So as we're talking, I'm like, hey, this is where I'm at. And he said something that like hit me and he was right. He's like, Morgan, the only thing that's stopping you from where you want to go that I've observed is it's not the knowledge. It's not the vision. It's not even the energy. It's not like you're not motivated. You have an execution gap. And I was like, what? Like, because to this point, I've been executing, right? I've been creating a video every day. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, it's not what you think. It's like the execution gap is long lasting execution and not to be a squirrel. So it's not like, hey, I do something for 60 days. Next thing, it's like, can you have a long lasting execution for an entire year? And you're like, I'm committed to this thing and I'm gonna go after it. And then it's like that compounds into 2, 5, and 10. He's like, your biggest gap is your execution. And if you were to narrow that focus of execution and just take it one step at a time a day, you will hit the goals that you want to. And he was right. That conversation was in 2020. We had that conversation, right? It literally was right before. It's great. It was actually like such a divine moment. 2 weeks after Kobe died, I had been a huge Kobe fan. And it was kind of like, you're not executing like Kobe. So are you really a fan? Like that, I was challenged with that. And I was like, that, that hits you and you're like, you're right. So let's fix it. And then it was 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, 2 weeks later, COVID happened and everything shut down. So that conversation there was very, very timely. And I remember being like, if the only thing that is stopping me is my execution gap, then I'm going to double down on it because that's probably what I'm missing to get to the next level. And again, he was right. Because then once I tapped into that execution gap for the past, 2 years now, everything changed. And I saw not just like big leaps, quantum leaps in everything that I was doing. Because I just realized all I have to do is get a schedule, organize it, and execute. That's it. Like everything else, I have the knowledge in my head. I've listened to enough things. I've read a lot of books at this point. I feel knowledgeable enough. I just need to execute. And the reason people don't execute is because it's daunting, right? Just like, why aren't most people fit? To work out every single day, it can be very, I got to get up, I got to go, right? So it's the same thing. And what I realize is when you're executing and you have this execution gap essentially, is that you are just like, I want to get to the finish line and I'm not focused on the process. At this point, everything is so process driven. It's like day by day, day by day, day by day. And I've seen just such amazing leaps because of that. But that is most people's gaps. That's why most people won't execute. They're not thinking about the small little steps they have to take to get there. If you're going to go climb a massive mountain, you don't just take one jump and you're at the top of the mountain. Like this isn't a video game. It's not like super jump. Oh, I'm there. It's like you take a whole path. It takes a minute. And that's what we have. That's what we forget sometimes.
So what does your process look like?
In terms of what? Because that's a that could be.
So let's just talk about overall, the process. Overall. Let's talk about process for laying out the week or laying out the day. But either one of those. So like as you highlighted after the conversation with KD, this awakening where you realize, hey, look, I'm talking about this stuff. I'm seeing this stuff. I want to embody this stuff, but I'm not actually doing this stuff because I'm caught in this trap of, oh yeah, I could do that. Or, oh, I could do that. And oh, I could do that. And I've get all of these things that I've done and I've done a lot of work, but I've not actually made meaningful progress down the field. I'm not moving my way through. So what does that process look like for you? Do you break it down? Do you break your process down by hour? Do you break it down by day? Do you break it down by week? Do you break it down by month? Do you do all of those kind of things? What's that process look like for you?
So I break it down by quarter.
Okay. Yep.
So weekly was aggressive. Monthly is, I don't know, monthly was weird. I didn't like that. Quarterly, I'm more of a fan of. So every quarter I'll be like, cool, this is what I'm going to go do.
Cool. Yep.
And then basically on that, I write down action steps to accomplish that. Because it's one thing to be like, I want to, I don't know, let's give an example. I want to close $500,000 in business in Q1. So if you say, that's cool to say that, but then like, what are you going to do? So if you just say, hey, I want to close $500,000 and then you just leave it there, that's probably, I mean, it could get done, but it might not. So I write down, okay, like reach out to X people, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. So there's like 8 action steps. So then now, once I have the action steps, I look at that during the week to figure out where do I place that for the week.
Okay.
Like that's how I go about it. So quarterly goals. So next week, I'll have to redo what those are going to be for the next quarter.
Yeah.
And then I highlight them. So green means we did it. And then red means we did not do it. So the reds, what I do is I bring the reds to the next quarter. Or if it's red, things change, right? So
sure,
there's some goals on there that I made at the beginning of the year. I look at them now and I realize they're not relevant anymore. So it's going to be red and I'm going to put basically like not relevant. But I could do red and be like, I just messed up. I don't know, got too greedy on this thing, or like I was too aggressive, or I didn't go hard enough, or like something like that, right? I can assess. So that's the way that my process works now. But every quarterly goal maps to the 5 big goals I have every year. So every single thing I'm doing at each quarter, at the end of the year, I need to look back at it and be like, wow, that was a great year because I did these things within the quarter. So that holds me to doing my execution steps and not just doing whatever. Because one of the things you can get caught up in, this is where people get lost, right? And I've been here before, is doing things to do things, to say that you're executing. Oh, I updated this document. Oh, I cleaned out my calendar. Oh, I cleaned up my inbox. Oh, I answered all these notifications on LinkedIn. But was that actually a primary function of you hitting your goals? Probably it wasn't. You probably said, hey, I did this in 3 hours, but did it actually help you?
Yeah. I think this is a really, really powerful message for folks. When you're going through that process of saying, did the work actually matter? Was I doing the right stuff? And beyond, was I doing the right stuff? There are times where you will do the right stuff, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Which means it's not the right stuff for the objective that you are working toward. And I think it's cool to hear you talk through your process, because I firmly believe that people struggle with this. They struggle with this because we're distracted. We see something, and then now that becomes the thing that we're doing. And it becomes another way of procrastination. Even though you're working, you're avoiding the big hairy monster of stuff that needs to get done. And I really like how you walk through your process. One of the other things that stood up for me, and just to reinforce this point, is how important it is to have a high level of alignment, not just in what's happening inside an organization, but self-alignment. Like, how are you aligning relative to your goals and objectives, and are things in alignment? And if they're not, you're potentially creating some friction. So Morgan, I think that's pretty powerful for people to hear. What's been the hardest part if you think about looking back over the course of the last 2 years and change, as you've made this move, where have you failed? Like, what's the hardest part? Where's the thing that's gotten in the way where you've had to remind yourself, hey, I'm allowing myself to get distracted? Not like, what I'm trying to unpack here is how people can say, all right, let's put some controls in place to help me potentially overcome that obstacle when it comes up.
So there's 3 things, right? Let's talk about where I sucked.
Yeah, cool. I'm finding out that there are some stuff that I'm really good at. There's some stuff that I am not good at. But okay, let's talk about Morgan. Where do you suck?
Yeah. So this is where we're going to start. And when you finally have realized I have an execution gap, right? And you realize the only thing I really need to do is execute and just take these small steps, and I will get there. Inevitably, like, it's black and white, which is why I like it.
Yeah.
If you put in the work, you will get results. That's time and time again. That's what's happened. Now, putting yourself in the right spot, right timing, right group is important, which is going to lead to my first thing. When you're executing, like you said, you can't do everything yourself. And I am a victim of that. Not a victim of that. I'm the main culprit. So like the thing is, like, I started out. So there's everyone just envision this real quick. So when I started out, I was 8 months out of college. So I don't know, 23, 24, whatever. And 5 months later, after starting my first job, I created a YouTube channel, and it's on LinkedIn, by the way, which no one has really tapped into. And then you go crazy, right? So everyone's asking you, to me, Mike, this was absurd. People are like, how do I run my SDR team? How do you do a comp plan? How much should we pay reps? And I'm like, I'm literally 5.5 months in a role. I just got out of college. I don't even understand taxes yet, right? I'm just trying to figure out how to live life. And you're asking me how to run a 100-person sales team. And I'm barely into it. So what happens is whether you're the most humble person in the world, your ego gets inflated where you're oh, I figured it out, right? I got this, inherently subconscious, I don't really need anybody. So being transparent. So that was I didn't realize that at the time, but looking back at myself, I'm that's what was happening, because it was just so much praise and accolades that you don't get taught in school. There's no course, there's no class for this. So because I was doing my own editing, I was creating my own videos, I was creating my own content, I was creating my own content strategy, my own distribution and everything. I was I got it. I'll listen to you, but I got it. So I was doing that, and it kept growing and it kept growing. I kept getting invited to panels and all these different roles that necessarily I probably wasn't qualified for, but it was happening very, very fast.
Yep.
Had a team of 13 reps, youngest person on the team, but was managing the most people on the team. in the entire organization have the most reps. So it was just like things were just happening so fast. And over time, what I've realized is your boy sucks at a lot of stuff. I like a lot. And I had to realize that, like, I didn't know, like, so I did a hosting for LinkedIn. And so they had like a technical team, they had like a production team, they had a design team.
Yeah.
And so people are literally like in my space, like, hey, can you move that 2 inches? Your lighting's off. Your audio sounds a little wonky. Your camera angle's off. And so for me, like 6 years ago, I'd have been like, stop, I got it. Y'all don't like, that would have been me. I just would have been like annoyed by it. But in that moment, I was like, yeah, I don't know this. My job is to show up and deliver. That's what I do really well. Put me in front of the video. Tell me what we need to talk about. I'll bring the energy. I'll bring the points. I got it. It's what I do best. But lighting, camera, background, audio, logistics, no. Like, I need direction. Otherwise, I'm gonna be lost and the whole thing is gonna go to shambles. So that is one of the hardest things to do is when you're executing, you have to realize, what are my strengths? What am I really good at? Let me lock that in. I'm gonna show up and do what I need to do. But there's power in saying, hey, I don't know how to set up logistics. Content house. I asked for a lot of help. I was like, yo, I have no idea how we're going to run a live event right now. Like, that's not my thing. I've done it before in the past, but like, that's not my specialty. So cool. I tapped someone for that. Hey, I'm really good at the content, but like, I don't have all the content ideas. I'm going to tap on someone who has probably more content ideas. Can you help me with this? Right? Like, food. I don't know what food people want for the house. Like, I know what I want to eat, but how do we get that? How do we get delivery? I tap someone for that. So when you're executing, know that like you need a team to support you. Like, I have people who, look, if their event needs to get done, I know where to go to. For photography, I don't take good photos. I know someone for that. Videos, I know someone for that, right? Podcast post-production, I can edit, but I'm not the best editor. I have someone for that now. So I realized that everything I was doing it, but it was average or subpar level. And in order to be exceptional, I realized I'm good in these lanes. I will drive in these lanes. People know I'm good in those lanes. They leave me alone. When it comes to other things, I'm not good at them. And I'll be like, hey, I suck here. Can you help? And that's like the hardest thing to do, because you feel like you're not enough, but you are enough by saying, I don't know this. I'm not good at this. So that's like number one. Number two,
I want to let's go into that a little bit deeper, because I think that whole piece around being exceptional is super important. Like, you can't be exceptional at 600 things.
No, it's not possible.
Like, that's not exceptional. You become a generalist. It's hard to be known for something specific. And we've talked a little bit about music, so let's go Disney show tunes. Sometimes you have to just let it go. Like, you really just have to put it out there and just say, you know what, this is not my strength. No. I know somebody who's really, really, really good at this. Like, Nick, who lives out here in Arizona, has given me some feedback on video, and it is fascinating to watch him do some of the stuff that he does on video. And I see some of it. I'm like, I have no idea how you have the patience to do the editing, but it's engaging and it's conversational. And the point there, just to really reinforce what I heard as Morgan was describing this, is know what you really like doing and know what you're really, really good at, and stay there. Don't let the distraction turn into all of the other things that need to be done or can be done, because there's the cool thing about this world is there are some people who are really good at those other things.
Yep.
And their expertise will help level you up as you collaborate, like had happened in the content house. So that is pretty powerful, even just in the first one.
Yeah. We got more. We got more. We got more. So no, I agree with that. You have to be willing to let people do their thing and not see it as like they're trumping you, like they're doing better than you. It's just more so like that's going to help you in the long run. So number two is another thing is overthinking, because one thing I look at is I overthink everything, that I have to like map it out to some perfect degree. And like, that's just not reality. So you can stop your execution by just overthinking the entire situation, and you overthink the entire thing. So then you actually don't do it. And then you're mad when someone else does it. And it was a pretty simple execution step that you could have taken. Right. So like, and if you execute, the thing is, people are going to help you along the way, as long as you're being genuine and you're actually trying to get after it. People will come out of nowhere and be like, hey, like, let me talk to you real quick. Let me try to help you with this. Like they will do that, but you also have to realize that like that is going to be a scenario, right? Like that at the end of the day, you have to not overthink it. And this is me talking to me because I overthink because this is ironic. I overthink because I think everything's going to go bad, which is like, yeah, which is not what people would think.
When you say everything's going to go bad, is it what's the worst that could happen? Or is it that you really just are like, oh crap. Like what's.
Yeah, the latter. I felt like there was a lot of things. It has to do with I got over it, but it was like younger Morgan. When I would do certain things, everything. Talking to, I mean, let's just be transparent. Talking to girls, like going, like trying out for basketball teams, trying to do some extracurricular thing. Like I always try to take another step, and it was always somehow a failure. Yeah. And so, like, it just somehow as a child, just conditioned in me that like I have to overthink everything and strategize everything in my head so I could find a way that it does not go wrong. So because I inherently think deep down that everything's actually not going to go right, and that's the energy that I carried. And it wasn't until I talked to my mentor about it where he was like, dude, like you're holding that kid and it's preventing you from reaping your rewards. And yeah, it was an emotional moment. Like I cried. I was like, no one's ever really said that to me before. Like I knew it, but I didn't know how to like express it. And he was able to pull it out of me and be like, nah, like you need to put that person to rest. Like it's stopping you, right? From everything. Because if you think everything's inherently going to go bad, that's the energy you're carrying. So then everyone's going to feel like you think everything's going to go bad, whether you realize it or not. So he's like, you need to expect that great things are going to happen. And he said, even when they go bad, that's okay. But as long as you expect great things to happen, you're going to have more wins than you do losses. And that really hit home with me. And I was like, you know what? He's right. Like I have to take a step back and realize that if I expect great things to happen, they will. And that was the big difference for me because I would always overthink to compensate things not going bad. Now I do still, I mean, it's part of me. I still do overthinking, but I say, okay, we're done and we execute. And we're like, let's just make it happen now. So it's, I've gotten better, but that's one of the reasons that stunted me from a lot of things that, you know, I could have been doing. It's fine. But I look back at it and that was the reason why.
The thing that pops up to me as you're talking through it is that the importance of that mindset, like that mind and how important mindset is. There's it's been a while since I've played sports, but like when you can play tight or you can play loose.
Yeah.
Are you going to do better when you're playing tight or are you going to do better when you're playing loose?
Yep.
Where's the flow going to come from? So really cool. So you said 3. So that was 2. What's the third one?
Yeah. So this is an interesting one because this is not overthinking. So don't think it's the same. Okay. This is over researching. So it's a little bit different. So what happens here is you're trying to find I'm like looking around to see if I can pull up an example, but you're trying to find like the holy grail, like the book that's going to give you the exact blueprint that's going to tell you exactly what to do. So again, that's not overthinking. This is over researching. You're like, I need to go read 50 books, watch 10 YouTube videos and 5 talks, a sermon. I need to get blessed by the water in Italy. Like you're going to the nth degree to like make this one small execution step. It's important to do research. I'm not saying don't do research, but this is over research where you're like, I need a year of researching before I take a step. When it's like, you can still take steps and research along the way, right? So that's what I would also say as well, is that people do over researching. They try to find the golden book, the golden mentor. I need this person. And a lot of these things, like I faced it a little bit. This one I haven't faced as much. But the thing is that like, yeah, you want to find the one mentor that will give you the advice, the one person that will give you the advice, the one book that will give you the advice. And those people come along the way. The famous quote, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. But the only way the teacher is going to appear is if you're executing, not if you're just doing research all day long and not doing anything about it. So that's one thing I would tell people is like, yes, go read your books, go watch YouTube videos. I do that. Like right now, I'm really focused on body language. I'm trying to become a body language assassin. What
can you tell me about my body language while we're talking?
Okay, let's dive into it. So
let's do it. So what's a body language assassin? What did you know? What have you noticed in my body language as we've been talking through? And this is this is audio podcast. We might take some video clips, but actually, heck, let's make this a video clip. Tell me about my body language.
Okay.
Assassin.
Okay. And okay, and oh, by the way, like I'm not, because some people, I know some of y'all are thinking I'm not certified, right? I don't have like a thing like, oh, here's my certification. I know some of y'all thinking that like, oh, is Morgan certified? No, literally all I've been doing is watching YouTube videos for the past 4 months and like picking up on things along the way to like see how people's body language is, especially in a Zoom environment. Like I felt like it's important. And as I go back in person, I just want to be able to read people. So
I'm ready for you to say, and I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night or something like that.
So what I've noticed in this conversation, you started off very laxed and stand back. So typically what that means for people is you're like, okay, I don't know where this conversation is going to go. So I'm here to absorb it all. As we've gotten closer in the conversation, you lean towards the mic. So when you lean towards the mic as I'm talking, that means you have a point that you want to express or a question, but I'm still talking. So you kind of like go back a little bit and then you lean back in and I notice it because you're like, he's like, I have a question, Morgan, stop talking. So every time that you lean in, you really want to ask a question, but you're also leaning in because you're like, wow, that's actually a really good point. I haven't thought of that. We need to stop so we can unpack that point for the listeners because there's so much there and I don't want them to miss it, right? As well. And then sometimes your eyes, you'll kind of go like this a little bit because it's a point that you probably didn't expect me to say, or you wouldn't like heard from me before. You're like, so when we talked about, oh my gosh, the point that I just made around, like say expecting things to go bad, like you made a face like this, like, wait, I want to understand that because that's not something that I thought of. Right. And also as well, like you just made a face like this is like to confirm like, hey, what I was saying is accurate. And you did think that. So there's just a couple of things that I'm picking up.
You're working on becoming an assassin. And it's, I think one of the cool things about body language and energy and why I love, a whiteboard in an office and getting in front of people and the engagement is that you can pick up so much more from the way people are acting when they're saying things than just the words that are coming across. And I know tone's important and pace is important, but when you see that nonverbal and you can get people leaning in and smiling and kind of engaged in the conversation, then you have something.
Yep.
So really cool. It is an important skill for people to learn and build and hone, because sometimes, again, when we run into this, like imagine you're walking down the street, you say, hey, how are you doing? And someone says good, but you could just see it in their eyes that good is not
see it.
Good. Like good. Yep. So really, really, really cool. Morgan, awesome on the body language assassin side of things. As we were talking about that came from a discussion that we're having around this tendency that some of us have to just keep doing the research, keep looking for the next piece rather than getting out there and just doing the work, which is part of the learning process and part of that execution process. So how should people think about just going out there and taking those next logical steps like you talked about?
So there's a lot of time wasters in the world. And I think I've identified this is a top 5 time waster. Like truly, this is going to hit some of y'all real quick. As you listen to this, you're going to be like, wow. Listening to a podcast or a YouTube video that gives you information and doing nothing with it, but just taking the feeling of motivation with you. Let's say you listen to a podcast every week and it's a 30-minute podcast, right? So that would be 120 minutes for the month. So that's 2 hours. So let's say you did that every week for the year. That's 24 hours, right? You just wasted a day and you did nothing. So if you compound that, imagine all the YouTube videos you watch, all the content you read, it's probably more than that. And you waste all of it because you do nothing with it. That's actually one of the biggest wastes of time for you. You might, honestly, you might as well just watch something different. Like, don't even listen to podcasts that have information at all because you just wasted your time. Go watch, I don't know, a Star Wars fight video. Like you could literally, I would rather you go watch that than listen to something that has information and do nothing with it. Biggest waste of your time. No purpose. So why am I bringing that up? The reason I bring it up and how I do this is that let's just go back to body language. I actually mesh it a little bit with like Chris Voss because I took that masterclass. But what I do is these videos are typically like 30, 40 minutes. What they do is they will break down, like, it makes you look at movies so differently, by the way. They break down James Bond, like everything he does in the movie and like why he does it. One of my favorite shows, Peaky Blinders, they break down Thomas Shelby. Like they break down the guy from Vikings. I forgot the main character, but they break him down, right? So they break down Tony Stark, Iron Man, and they break down like how he interacts with people. Suits, they do Harvey Specter, right? They like do the scene and they say, this is what's happening in the scene that you didn't know about. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't even know this was going on. So like, I've watched hundreds of these videos at this point. So now that I understand what it means and how I convey my own self when I have my body language and like what I'm portraying, I'm hyper focused on it now. So within that, like even in conversations now, like if you truly want to connect with somebody and build a relationship faster, 95% of the conversation that you have with someone, look them in the eyes. Most people, when they talk, they dart, they look like this because they're not confident in themselves, or they may be like intimidated by the other person. But if you can look a person in the eyes, it shows confidence, it shows composure, it shows that you're listening, it shows that you're attentive, right? Those are things that help. So my whole point is to bring it back is I watch a video and I'll write down like 2 to 4 things that I'll do. So I'll be like, okay, they said walk this way. I'm going to try that walk out. Watch out for this thing. Cool. When someone does this is what it means. Cool. Etc. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that I look out for is people's like, I don't know what this is called, but like what this is called right here?
Like an Adam's apple kind of thing?
The Adam's apple.
Right.
So when you're like when you're having a tense conversation with someone, you need to be direct. Look at their Adam's apple. So typically what this saliva here, it basically is the fight or flight response. So when someone swallows, that means that they're making a decision of their fight or flight. So when someone's getting maybe a direct conversation or harsh feedback, they're typically going to swallow like this because they're getting nervous, they're afraid. And then now they have to make a decision of what they're going to do next, which is I'm going to flight, which is I'm going to shell up because of the feedback I'm getting, or I'm going to fight and be angry because this feedback's not valid, right? Yeah. But people typically swallow when they have that fight or flight response, and you'll notice an emotional shift. So I like pay attention to that in conversations. Like if I make a joke or something like that, and maybe someone's uncomfortable and they swallow, I'm like, okay, that joke they did not like. So maybe I don't need to do that ever again, right? And I need to figure that out. People, when they start off conversations, another thing I pay attention to is they'll have their arms crossed like this. This is defensive. I'm not really feeling this conversation. I don't know really what's going on. Especially if you're like on a date. If someone's like this and they're like talking to you, that means that like, okay, I showed up here. I don't really know what's going on. I'm not feeling this conversation yet. And your goal is, how can I get them to open up and at least go like this, right? Because if they're like this the entire conversation, yeah, you're not going to see that person ever again. Dating, like selling, like if someone's like this, not good. So I pay attention to that. If someone's like this for like a long period of time, I'm like, okay, they're not vibing with me right now. Why are they not vibing? Do I need to tell a story? Is it like, do I need to ask a different question? Like, I need to change this conversation right now, right? To something that maybe makes sense, or maybe we're not a fit from a relational standpoint, whatever that may be. So I write the 2 to 4 things down and then I practice them in real time. And then I use Chris Voss's labeling to see what's going on. I'll be like, hey, it feels like, it sounds like, it looks like, to figure out like what's going on. So if someone's like, I don't know, like this, I might be like, hey, it looks like you may not, again, this depends on how bold I feel, but it looks like you may not be like enjoying this conversation right now. Like, is there something that like you want to talk about? Or like, maybe your day was crazy today. Like, let's talk about that. Maybe you feel off. I can notice these certain triggers and then I label them to see if that's true or not.
Yeah.
So I use both of those to test. But the whole point is, if you're going to listen to something, 2 to 4 things, write them down and then go execute on them in real life, see if they work or not.
Morgan, you're talking about time wasters, and you were saying, hey, look, there's these things that we do that will waste a lot of time. One of those time wasters is the amount of time that we might invest in consuming information and then not doing anything with it. We could have better used it someplace else. So then you said, hey, there's a couple of things that you can do when you're taking in the information and then start putting it into practice. Anything else that you want to share around that? Anything else that people should be thinking about as we wrap up the conversation around this, addressing the execution gap, taking information in, going out there, getting things done? Anything else you want to leave the audience with?
Like, pick like 2 to 3 topics you're like, I want to get better at. So again, mine right now is like body language is at the forefront.
Okay.
Getting better at videos, like how to make like truly captivating videos, like where it's so formulaic, because I'm a formulaic person. It's worked for me in prospecting. So I know there's a formula there. Like, okay, what's the hook? How do I break it down? How do I close? How do I keep it compact? Like, I'm really trying to nail it than just being like, I have a lot of energy, listen to me, which is what I've rided on for like the first couple of years. And now I'm getting more locked in that process. Right. And then the third thing has really been around how to make engaging events. So like a webinar, like those things of that nature. So those are topics I'm looking at. So what I do is I learn something and I'm like, let me try it. So like at a webinar yesterday, it's a couple of things I learned from like someone else. I watched someone's webinar and they did a couple of things I thought were cool. So then I took it and used in yesterday's webinar and I was like, oh, that worked. Like that did not work. So it's just the willingness to this is the best way to think about it. Treat yourself as a scientist. Everything in this world that you like started off as an experiment. So if you think of yourself as a scientist, you don't need a degree. Treat yourself as a scientist and you say, hey, I'm just going to run experiments and I'm going to go in the lab is what I like to call it. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to go in the lab. I'm going to try out some new things. I'm going to post some stuff. I'm going to see if it works or not. Because you don't know if it works unless you do some type of test or experiment. And that's what I encourage people to do. Take these steps and then be like, I'm going to experiment with these things and see if they work or not.
I tell you, it's like we're back to Dr. Dre going in the lab and coming out with Chronic 2001. Yeah. And so, Morgan, this has been an absolutely awesome conversation. Where can people find out more about what you're working on and follow you?
So the majority of the content that I post, the most community and where I'm really at is on LinkedIn. However, LinkedIn has, I don't know, they shaded me. We're going to figure it out because there's a 30,000 connection limit. So if you try to connect with me, you're going to be salty because we know the drill here. So you can follow me there, and also Instagram that has no barriers of entry. You can follow me there as well if you have any questions. I've
noticed you're doing some Instagram reels out there. You're getting pretty active, or are you just taking TikTok stuff and putting them on Instagram reels? Like, what do you both?
Yeah. So like that's one of my execution gaps right now has been content. So the past 3 weeks, I've had a lot of big projects I've been working on, and I've had no time to truly create and do what I want to do. So the past 3 weeks are just kind of all over the place. Now I'm, taking some time over the weekend on Sunday for sure, mapping out some new content, some new TikToks that I'm going to be doing. So yes, I'm getting more into the TikToks, the YouTubes. You'll see more of those moving forward. I'm going to be very, very video focused.
Awesome. I've been messing around with Instagram reels, and the sad thing that I'm seeing right now is people are more interested in seeing me deadlift than they are hearing me talk about sales. So it's
all interesting. It's all interesting, right?
It is. Well, Morgan, again, awesome conversation. We'll include links to Morgan's social in the show notes. If you know of somebody who would enjoy this episode, get value out of the conversation, please share it with them. Let Morgan and I both know via LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram, all of the socials. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?